Καλησπέρα σας. Θα ξεκινήσω λίγο στα ελληνικά, να κάνω μια εισαγωγή και η κουβέντα μας θα γίνει στα αγγλικά. Είναι μεγάλη χαρά να συντονίσω αυτό το πάνελ. Ο τίτλος είναι πολύ εύστοχος, γιατί μίλησε και ο κύριος Αρταβάνης για την επανάσταση την οποία χρειάζομαστε. Ο τομέας της βιοτεχνολογίας και των επιστημών υγείας πραγματικά έχει να επιδείξει καινοτομίες για να επιληθούν προβλήματα περίπλοκα. Το ζήσαμε αυτό και στην περίοδο της πανδημίας, όπου ήταν η βιομηχανία της βιοτεχνολογίας αυτή που ανταποκρίθηκε με ταχύτητα και αποτελεσματικότητα στις ανάγκες των καιρών, αναπτύσσοντας εμβόλια, φάρμακα και ιατροτεχνολογικά προϊόντα, έτσι ώστε να καταφέρουμε να διαχειριστούμε με επιτυχία την πανδημία σε παγκόσμιο επίπεδο. Όλοι γνωρίζουμε ότι στο χώρο των επιστημών υγείας είχαμε την παραδοσιακή φαρμακοβιομηχανία με την ανάπτυξη μορίων και τη δεκαετία του 80 και 90 είχαμε την είσοδο των αντισωμάτων στην θεραπευτική και τώρα ζούμε μια πραγματικά πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα περίοδο με την είσοδο των γονιδιακών και κυταρικών θεραπείων και βεβαίως τεχνολογίες όπως είναι η RNA, τεχνολογίες και ούτω καθεξής. Θα συζητήσουμε για αυτά. Ο πρώτος ομιλητής θα είναι σε λίγο κοντά μας για να συνδεθεί από την Αμερική ο Στέλιος Παπαδόπουλος, ο πρόεδρος της Biogen, ο οποίος θα μας έδινε μια εικόνα για το πώς κινείται ο τομέας αυτός. Ο Στέλιος Παπαδόπουλος γνωρίζετε όλοι ότι είναι για μας τους Έλληνες ο νονός της βιοτεχνολογίας και πάντοτε οι απόψεις του πραγματικά αποτυπώνουν την πραγματικότητα. Μέχρι να συνδεθεί ο κ. Παπαδόπουλος, θα ήθελα, αφού συστήσω το πάνελ, να δώσω το λόγο στον Όρη Hadomi. Εξεβονίμων είναι η Άντζελα Σπαθάρου, η οποία είναι leader στην ομάδα του Health και του Lifesciences στην Ευρώπη, στην IBM. Ο Νίκος ο Γαλακάτος, Έλληνας, που μας κάνει περήφανος στο εξωτερικό, επικεφαλής του τομέα Lifesciences της Blackstone, επενδυτικός οργανισμός. Ο Όρη Hadomi, ευχαριστούμε πολύ για την αποδοχή της πρόσκλησης, αντιπρόεδρος της Medtronic στο κομμάτι του Business Development και νέων συνεργασιών και ο Γιάννης ο Kotsiopoulos, Γενικός Γραμματέας του Υπουργείου Υγείας. Οπότε καλύπτουμε όλο το φάσμα, θα αναφερθώ ειδικά πριν την εισαγωγή του καθενός και μέχρι να συνδεθεί ο Στέλιος ο Παπαδόπουλος θα παρακαλούσα τον Όρη. Όρη, you are the most appropriate person to talk about the insight-driven care. It is a new phrase in the healthcare sector because everybody expects that insight-driven care will become the central theme of future healthcare innovation because we are trying to connect the dots in the patient's journey. Everybody knows that healthcare is fragmented, so the patient journey is sometimes is discontinued or most of the times is not lean, so we have to connect the dots to come to a patient level and end up to personalized decisions. We are in the era of personalized medicine. In order to make this journey successful and of course in order to treat and the last patient as appropriate as possible.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. So indeed, the insight-driven care is a concept, and you can name it in many different ways, but the aim of this concept is to look at the patient in a more holistic way. So rather than the traditional medicine that today is very fragmented, as you said, but also looks at the care episode and has a hard time to connect the dot along the patient care journey. We were thinking that in these virtual days, where you can actually not only connect, but also process the data that is gathered from different stages, and not only medical data, but if you know more about the lifestyle of the patient, if you know more about his social activities, if you know more about his mental situation, you can do far better patient selection, therapy recommendation, execute the right therapy on the right patient, and also follow up on the recovery. And being able to track after each and every one of these processes will teach the algorithm to do a better job in the next patient selection and in the next therapy recommendation. So insight-driven care means that the purpose is no longer on just collecting data, but to make sense of all of these data by converting the data into an insight or actionable insights that can make a difference for the patient himself.
Okay, this is really exciting. And talking about data, I like using the motto because I'm a mathematician. I only believe in God, for the rest bring me data. So definitely data is very valuable to us, and I would like Angela to tell us we elaborate on this data, big data analytics, and to be honest, I would like you to tell us about new models of exploring this data. And you know, in the past we started doing experiments in the mice in order to discover a medicine, and now we have quantum analytics, AI, and all these new models that allow us to bring new treatment earlier in the market and serve the patient more efficiently and quicker.
Thank you very much. So as you mentioned earlier, I lead IBM services for Europe, Middle East and Africa for healthcare and life sciences. And before that, I was with McKinsey & Company for 19 years in healthcare. What has struck me in the last 5 years, I would say, is just the sheer acceleration, even before COVID, of the pace of using technology, data and analytics to change health systems, very much to Ori's point, and to accelerate discovery. If I stick with life sciences for a minute, what we see is that the use of data is revolutionizing everything in life sciences, from the discovery phase, R&D, where we also have accelerated discovery, but also digital trials and other aspects of R&D, all the way to optimizing the performance and operations of pharmaceutical companies, all the way to intelligent manufacturing led by AI, building patient-focused digital health ecosystems, and engaging with clinicians and patients differently. So all of these things, it's an end-to-end transformational change. I think colleagues will also mention two key features there are the personalization of care and the use of precision medicine. And one of the areas where in our organization and similar organizations have seen a big role of the data has been, for example, personalization of care through the use of genomics. So IBM is the strategic data partner in the UK of Genomics England, which is the largest state-based organization of this nature. And the interesting thing for me is that what is happening right now in England in the use of genomics is no longer using genomics in an ivory tower just for tertiary purposes. It's actually trying to bring genomics to the fingertips of the frontline clinician, even in primary care, and enabling them through the use of data in a different way to understand when they need genomics to personalize care of their patients, how to order genomic testing, and how to reach and get proper interpretation of results that will allow them to tailor treatment. So this is something that's happening already in countries like the UK, and in fact, different parts of the Middle East are building similar capabilities. But the other example I wanted to bring is the partnership we announced about a week ago with Moderna Moderna, of course, everybody knows by now, as a company that helped revolutionize vaccine discovery, the mRNA vaccine for COVID, and the massive acceleration of vaccine discoveries in that period. Now, Moderna clearly is a highly sought-after company at this point, and they want to expand the services in other areas. In fact, one of the areas they're looking at, from what I understand, is different types of cancer in association with Merck and other companies on the immunology side. So IBM is bringing into this, on the one hand, the regenerative AI capabilities that we have developed over the years, and on the other hand, jointly with that, quantum computation capabilities. So IBM started developing quantum computing several years ago and is now, I think, the largest, most significant private sector provider of quantum computing. And quantum computing, I won't get into the mechanics part of it, but fundamentally what it does, it helps accelerate at stages that we have never seen before the actual pace of discovery. So if you think how fast we moved during COVID without quantum computing in the mix, effectively the sky's the limit bringing this into the equation. So I think there is an enormous potential to go fast after areas that we didn't even dare to go after before. And I think that will only become faster in the years to come across Europe and globally.
Thank you very much. Yanni, what the state has to do in order to consolidate all these data that is available in order to offer better health services to each patient and in order to go to, especially here in Greece, in order to follow the international trends regarding new models of treatment and how we are going to contain the rising expenditure, not only in pharmaceuticals, but in the healthcare sector in general. We know that these new treatments, for example, gene therapies, are characterized as the tsunami for the healthcare systems because we know the high cost of these new treatments. Probably it is certain that countries will not be able to cover all these costs, and we have to find value-based solutions to sort this issue out.
Thank you for the kind invitation. I am extremely honored to be among so many distinguished speakers, and obviously I think people will be more interested to hear about you guys first. I think I've talked about what we are doing in Greece most recently, but let me touch upon two or three things that we have been doing to make sure that we address the challenges of the future. Clearly, there are challenges, but there are also opportunities because, as you said, you know, we need to leverage all kind of the new technologies that will happen in the near future. So, how do we do that in Greece? Now, our strategy was to make sure that we move towards a value-based healthcare model. Now, this is not straightforward that it can happen immediately. So we had to make sure we put in place this new organization that will measure, A, the quality of the services that we provide. So we set up a new agency for measuring the quality of the services in Greece. It's called OVP. I'm sure some of you might have heard of this. Greece did not have a regulator for healthcare services. We had providers. We had AOP, which kind of is the kind of single buyer of healthcare services in Greece, but we had nobody to measure the quality of the services, and we had nobody to regulate the market. So now we have this new agency in place, and we believe that is very crucial if we move towards a value-based healthcare model. Now, the second thing we did is that we moved towards a new model for costing healthcare services in Greece. As most of you know, Greece, during the years of the financial crisis, we introduced the notorious scans. Now, these are going out of market pretty soon. So this year is the last year of transition. So we'll have the DRGs. The DRGs is going to replace scans from 2024. So in the next few months, we'll transition to the new model. And this is really important because we'll have the mechanism for reimbursing services based on scientific models. This is really important if we want to contain cost. The third thing that we did is we need to buy services in a much better and much more scientific way. Now, Greece had a central procurement agency which was called EKP. EKP was not working, and when we wanted Vassilis to buy things during COVID, it was really difficult because it was not staffed, things were not in place. So what we did is we rewrote the legislation for EKP. The new agency is now working. We have recruited scientists working there. And what we aim to do is make sure we move towards a value-based procurement model. Now, in order to do that, we need to make sure we have data. I've been talking about data and digitization in the morning, so I don't want to bore you to death again. But this effort is underway, and we are kind of investing a lot of money in digitizing healthcare services in Greece. Now, there's an underlying factor under all of that, which is the skills of the workforce in Greece that need to absorb all these things that are happening. So this is something that we need to make sure we kind of invest heavily in the next few years, and I hope that the new government will do that. And I think the skills of the workforce need to change for them to understand that the new models of care coming, they need to understand what value-based healthcare is, and we need to retrain healthcare professionals to understand that there is cost, but there is also quality involved in the provision of healthcare services in Greece.
Thank you very much. In order to do all these things, we need money. And Nikos, we would like your insight, your point of view regarding this issue, how things are evolving at a global level, the macro, your macro view, and what is happening now in the US, in Europe, in China, how all these continents are trying to raise money in order to promote research and technology and, of course, innovation.
Great. So what I do, and I'm in the business of science, and business of science is take innovation on one hand and convert it to products that make an impact on patients' lives. I've been doing it for close to 40 years, and I can tell you, to make a new drug, it's a miracle. You have 1 in 10,000 chances when you start of getting a product to the finish line. It costs $2.5 billion per drug, and it takes 12 years. So it is not for the faint in heart. When you talk about democratization of drug development, I'd say it's not a democracy here. I'd like to make an analogy to developing a drug to a high-performance car that goes through a race. And the only chance it has is to win, because to developing a drug and get it approved by the regulators, you either have to have the first drug in a class, so the first to treat a disease, or you have to be the best in treating a disease. Second doesn't really make it. So starting with innovation, we live in extraordinary times of innovation. But we also live in extraordinary times, period, and the two are very much linked, because it impacts capital raising and how to fund all this expensive development. Innovation is, I've never seen more innovation at such scale in the 30, 40 years that I've been doing it. And that's driven by, as Spiro said, I have to reciprocate Spiro here, by biology, by technology like DNA sequencing and other sequencing techniques, and more recently by computer science and artificial intelligence. When I started my career, sequencing would take several days to determine a sequence of a small piece of DNA. Now you can sequence your entire genome in a couple of hours. So it's incredible work that has transformed medicine and drug development. If you take an acute disease like cancer, that it was a death sentence, now it's a chronic disease. As part of what we do, we meet a lot of patients. I met a multiple myeloma survivor that started therapy about 15, 16 years ago, chemotherapy, a poison, and now he's doing great on bispecific antibodies and lives a great life, and it's a miracle. It really is a miracle. We used to take an approach to treat symptoms like pain, and now we can cure disease. With hepatitis C, you take a pill for 8 weeks and you don't need a liver transplant, you get cured. So we're moving much more in that direction, slowly but constantly. And another part that maybe impacts healthcare more broadly, the impact is on compliance. 30 years ago, the only drug to lower cholesterol was Lipitor, something that you take every day for the rest of your life. 30% of people taking a LDL lowering agent keep taking the lowering agent. Antibodies against the targets here, PCSK9 and others, have been involved, that you take them once a week, once a month. We develop a product, help develop a product that you can take once every 6 months, and now you can do gene editing. So it's the journey going from a pill a day to one and done, single treatment the rest of your life. So that's on the innovation, just unprecedented innovation. But on the other hand, we live in unprecedented times. Earlier today, I heard Nubini, and I was reading Ray Dalio's work on my way out here from Boston a couple of days ago. We're in a pretty complicated world, one that I also haven't seen in my lifetime being that complicated. We have inflation that actually the entire biotechnology industry has never seen inflation because it's only 40 years old. So people do not know how to handle that. Central banks have been printing money in huge quantities, raising with debt being at unprecedented levels. The whole polarization at the national level, at the global level, in the United States, the discrepancy between wealth and poor people giving rise to tremendous amount of tension, the rise of China and the US-China conflict that is rising by the day and changes geopolitics fundamentally. And I don't want to put aside climate change. That puts huge amount of pressure on economies and how to handle that. And finally, artificial intelligence, that I think most of us feel it's a tremendous force for good, but also can make 20% of the population need to look for new jobs because it makes their jobs obsolete. So we are at the cusp of a very fundamental change in our world. And when that happens, the source of capital is the public markets. And when uncertainty is in the public markets, you cannot raise capital, you cannot feed innovation. And to give you a very simple example, the entire biotechnology industry, primarily in the United States, 40% of public biotechnology companies have less than 1.5 years of cash. They can go out of business in 18 months. So, and biotechnology is the lab of the pharmaceutical industry. Most of the innovation happens in biotechnology companies. 2/3 of products that get approved every year have been invented in biotechnology companies, not pharmaceutical companies. So it is extraordinary innovation in extraordinary times, and one needs to be very, very careful about where to invest. I could not agree with Spiros more. It is only in the best things that we invest in. For us, actually, this is a tremendous opportunity to invest. Over the past 3 years, we committed $30 billion in life sciences, and cannot be better investing times, but not everyone can commit this type of capital in this sector.
Are you optimistic for the future?
Pardon?
Are you optimistic?
I'm very optimistic, but I'm also a very patient person. So you have to, these markets go in cycles, and it will come back, the markets will come back, the industry would be well-financed, but what we do not know is how long that's going to take. And given the magnitude of the macro changes, this could be the longest cycle that many of us have seen.
Angela, you are actively involved in the European Institute for Innovation and Technology for Health, so you are dealing with startups and all this stuff. So every startup needs money. What is the situation there?
Yes, so I'm on the board of EIT Health. It's an EU agency tasked with promoting innovation technology across Europe. And it does so by having local chapters in 6-7 different locations and bringing together innovators from Europe around those. On the very positive side, there's a tremendous amount of innovation in Europe. It's almost like the hotbed in so many areas, in life sciences, in medtech, in data and analytics, underpinning a lot of the discoveries and also the operational improvement of systems. However, what we do see is that there is, on the one hand, a virtuous interaction between research, academia, academic medical centers, large hospitals, and part of industry. That goes only so far. Ultimately, these startups need a route to market. And that's where we miss something in the game. So in many, many cases, we see tremendous innovation that doesn't scale. Like if I had my magic wand and could change one thing, it wouldn't be to bring more innovation, it would be to scale the tremendous innovation that's out there. Now, how funding can help with that? Clearly, I mean, you need investors and you need a more strategic approach on where and how to scale those. But we also need to think, if in the US, as an example, a lot of innovators can go directly to market and can go directly to consumer, in Europe, as an example, in most cases, you need to go through the state system because our health systems are structured differently. So we need to become intelligent buyers, and we need to prioritize at different levels, regional or national, the kind of innovation we want to see, but then systematically create route to markets for these people. Otherwise, we're going to lose innovation. They're going to fail or move, which is what's happening today.
Ori, what is the situation in the medtech arena regarding the advancements in the field?
So I can relate it from two different perspectives. One, as an executive in Medtronic, when we do see a lot of companies that apply and express interest to participate in funding, I can also relate to it as a person that founded several companies in this area and always was involved in raising money to my companies. I don't remember many difficult days as these days in being able to raise money. This is probably the paradise time for the investor because they can be selective. But the companies have really hard time to make the point, and to raise money for themselves. And I wish I could say that the best will survive. I'm not sure that this is the case. It's not even necessarily about being the best. And I don't know that the market can really, that the investor right now would be able to fund or be willing to fund all the availability that is there. So I do expect to see these cycles that mentioned earlier. We will lose some of these opportunities. And these that will stay will continue. I do think that at least companies like Medtronic, and they're not the only one, I don't see them in the near future investing in small early stage companies as they did in the past, because also their risk standard has been changed. And they don't no longer willing to participate in the risk of small companies, acknowledging that their value is in scaling up. So I do think that there is a big change in the way this ecosystem will feed itself and will grow.
Yanni, you are aware that almost 1 year ago, we submitted to the Prime Minister a study. The study was led by Stelios Papadopoulos with Spyros Artavanis Tsagonas and Nick Galakatos participated in this study. We were exploring the ways how Greece could become a hub in the field of biotechnology. And the answer was yes, that Greece could become a hub in the biotech sector, and we had to take specific measures that had nothing to do with money, mainly structural measures and minor changes in the legislation. And as a result of the study was that Greece could play a significant role in providing digital services in the pharmaceutical industry, and of course could be a leader in the field of clinical trials. Could you please comment on this?
Sure. I'm optimistic that Greece can really play an important role in the field of clinical trials. We've been working on this for a couple of years now, and there are huge potentials, not only because the Greek doctors, the Greek scientists are very well educated and they can definitely, they're competent enough to bring clinical trials to Greece. But what we also observed is that there were a lot of difficulties in the process. Now, minor changes to the legislation did lead to an increase in clinical trials in Greece, but also what we did notice was there was a lot of waste in the process from the inception of the clinical trial to the final approval. Now, with collaboration between all the different players in the field, I do believe that we can have lean processes in the Greek hospitals to accelerate clinical trials. Obviously, we need to educate our staff in order to do that, and I don't think that the mentality of our staff was there, so they were not aware that they had to help with clinical trials, and a lot of hospital managers were not aware of the added value that clinical trials were bringing to Greece. So this is a kind of a cultural changes that needs to happen. And obviously, cultural changes do not happen instantly. It takes time and effort. But I do agree with a kind of with the verdict of the study that minor improvements in different parts of the process can lead to a kind of significant update of clinical trials in Greece. Couple that with the changes that we're doing in terms of the investment in digital services in Greece and digitalization, as we mentioned before, I think we can definitely make the difference in the years to come. And we have already seen an increase over the last couple of years, which means that even these kind of small minor changes can definitely change the psychology and can give some kind of let's say impetus to the investors to bring clinical trials to Greece.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we have connection issues with Stelios Papadopoulos. We won't be able to have him by video, but we can listen to him. Stelios, αν μας ακούς, καλημέρα.
Καλημέρα, σας ακούω.
Ωραία. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay. We also have...
Well, now you can see me.
Oh, great.
That's joy. Well, look, Vassilis, I've been listening for most of the call on and off, so I did hear many of the commentary. If I could just add, a word or two, particularly the issue of, and maybe we can talk about the study later on if you want, the one we submitted on May 19th last year. On the issue of innovation, I think this is a word that everybody loves to love. I mean, what is not to love about innovation? But it's not as if we all agree exactly what we mean by innovation. And I will sort of like state two extremes. One is, many people think of any crazy idea as innovation. Wouldn't it be great if that were to work and how it would change life in the world? By my more conservative definition, innovation is a great idea that can be clearly reduced to practice and solve a real problem. If it cannot fill those criteria, and I heard for a moment before, Dr. Spatharou talked about scalability of ideas, and that's a critically important point. If it cannot solve a real problem, it cannot be reduced to practice, it's worthless. And what happens is when the capital markets become permissive, and from 2018 until 2021, any crazy idea, whether scalable, whether able to be reduced to practice, whether they were solving a real problem, got a lot of money. And Nikos is right. At some point, all these companies are going to have to face truth and decide what to do. And they're shutting down one after the other. And maybe, in my mind, that's not a bad thing. You know, bad ideas should not get too much money because then people get disappointed. But I'll repeat what Nikos said before. The innovation we're seeing in our world nowadays is extraordinary. All you have to do is look around and have some sort of memory. Nikos and I go back a very long time. If you ask the question, what we're doing for, you know, for cancer, for cardiovascular disease, for obesity and diabetes and metabolic disorders 30, 40 years ago, compared to what we do today, it's extraordinary. Anyway, I will stop and not say a whole lot more, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. So I keep the message that indeed there is an ongoing revolution in the life sciences space, and although we are not very, the times are turbulent, we hope that we will overcome these difficulties, and this innovation will definitely lead to better treatments for each patient, to most cost-effective healthcare systems, and of course, we will be able to offer to each patient the needed treatment. I think that we have passed the time we have for this panel. If there is, we could take one. 2 minutes, okay. If there is a question from, okay. Okay, we have no questions. Stelios, one more comment, please, regarding the study that we submitted last year to the Prime Minister on how Greece could become a hub in the biotechnology space.
Well, look, Vassilis, under your initiative, as you remember very well, we gathered up a group of people who know the business well, most of them piece of the diaspora, and we tackled the question of what can Greece do to become competitive in the global innovation-driven biopharma space. And I think the quick summary is that if we're talking about innovation in the form of novel, meaningful, exciting drug development, that is something that requires a very long-term investment in basic science. Academic research has to become better organized, better funded, better directed. And maybe 5 or 10 years from now, with that basis, if we can create, obviously not at the same scale, if we could create the equivalent of MIT, Harvard, and Cambridge in the Boston area, where truly innovative scientists mingle with financial people and executives and form companies with new ideas, we could do that too. It's not out of the question. Of course, it's extremely difficult. But we cannot wait for 10 years to get to the point that Greek academic science can yield exciting ideas. Is there something we can do in the meantime that could prepare us, prepare managers, leaders, business executives of the next wave of companies, and at the same time be a good contributor to the Greek economy? And then we cited a number of examples, primarily in the area of providing services to biopharma companies. Clearly, manufacturing is an opportunity. We've seen countries, Ireland first and foremost, through government initiatives, legislation, tax structures, has garnered the bulk of manufacturing that's ex-US, clinical trials, as you mentioned before, digital services, global projects that involve data gathering and analysis. So there's a lot that can be done. And I think the key thing of the study was we're not suggesting, we're not proposing ideas, which is pretty typical, where the government needs to put in 20, 30, 50, whatever, some amount of millions of euros to seed an opportunity. Rather, we pointed out to what needs to be changed structurally in terms of legislation, sometimes the mindset of the people, to allow for these things to happen. And once these changes are in place, the structural changes take effect, capital will flow and fund the ideas, provided capable people are there to lead those ideas.
Thank you very much, Stelios. I must mention here that the team who conducted this study under the leadership of Stelios Papadopoulos worked pro bono and produced a state-of-the-art result study, and this was done mainly during the pandemic period, and it was more difficult to altogether connect and conduct this study. But I strongly believe that we will be able to produce tangible results of what the study suggests, and at the end of the day, Greece become a hub in the biopharma sector. Thank you very much. Σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ.